Cody Rhodes is the first major name to move from AEW to WWE and shake up wrestling in the process. Today we're going to talk about how that happened, who was right or wrong, and why you should be following and hitting subscribe here on YouTube to get the details first. I'm Tom Colohue, and let's talk about wrestling. Now, Cody Rhodes has largely stayed quiet about his reasons for leaving AEW, though his contract clearly was not renewed, and there are reports out there stating that it may be down to budgetary concerns. Quite a few members of the AEW original roster have not seen their contract renewed, or they have been told it would not be renewed due to budgetary cuts and concerns that AEW have at the moment. When it comes to Cody Rhodes though, the first sign that he was about to become a free agent came in a report from Fightful. On January 17th this year, Fightful first reported that Cody Rhodes was an impending free agent and that he was working without a contract. To be clear on this, considerable information is already out there as to how Fightful obtained this information. In a later report on March 8th that I will be discussing later, Sean Sapp of Fightful did confirm firstly that he'd been speaking directly with Cody Rhodes, and then later on QT Marshall would confirm that at least some members of AEW's roster had been instructed to follow and communicate with Sean Ross Sapp and Fightful itself. Clearly this is information that Rhodes and or AEW wanted to see get out. Just under a month later, on February 15th, a report was released by the Wrestling Observer. They stated that many people backstage in WWE, both in terms of the roster and the management, were confident that we were going to see Cody Rhodes sign with the WWE, a company that he left several years previously to set up his own competitor. That competitor would of course become All Elite Wrestling. One of the reasons the WWE is so keen on signing Cody Rhodes is to grab a founder away from the competition. This kicked off something of a whirlwind, and it is also the point at which I personally got involved in the reporting around this. I'm going to be including my reports in this video so you can see who reported what first, as well as just who reported what right and wrong. On February 24th, I reported on my Twitter account in response to a question about Cody Rhodes' contract status that a contract offer was on the table, that a contract had not at that time been signed, and that the WWE were planning for a WrestleMania match including Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins. Keep this particular report in mind because you're going to see it from a lot of the other wrestling journalists in the weeks that followed. Now, I've done my research on this, and this is the first mention that I can find as to exactly what ended up happening at WrestleMania. This was of course followed up on YouTube with more reports, so be sure to subscribe not just here, but also on Twitter at Colohue as well. This is also when things start to get a little bit crazy, because it's followed up by several reports that really did start to muddy the water instead of just confirming what I'd already reported. On March 3rd, BodySlam reported that talks with Cody Rhodes had stalled, or at the very least gone quiet, meaning that the signing and potential WrestleMania match that I've mentioned were very possibly not going to happen. Now, to be clear, with benefit of hindsight, a month later at WrestleMania, Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins did wrestle, so this report was clearly incorrect. This of course did not stop this report from spreading like wildfire. A whole plethora of wrestling media not only covered this report, but shared it as far and wide as they could, despite the fact that I had reported previously that the match with Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins was still the plan and Cody Rhodes had not signed at that point. This is why you need to follow here, because my reports don't go as far and wide as reports like the one that BodySlam reported. The day after this report, and in many ways in response to it on March 4th, I reported that the match between Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes had been locked in for WrestleMania. March 4th, by all means have a check on this exact YouTube channel and you will see the video. Everything I speak about here provides evidence of everything else that I'm speaking about. Every report that I'm mentioning and giving you a date for means that you can go and research, look up, compare, and double check every fact and figure. Particularly for my reports, I want you to be double checking because I know what happens when people don't double check. You get reports that slip through the cracks that are incorrect from several different sources. This was followed by a tweet on March 5th about Cody Rhodes signing with the WWE, let's say in and around the Madison Square Garden show. Now, there was a lot of excitement about the Madison Square Garden show, led by a number of different wrestling journalists who was stating that people should be watching, people should be keeping an eye. Something big was going to happen at the show. Nothing actually big happened at the show. It was standard paint by numbers. They were all incorrect on that one. Maybe let's just say it was smoke and mirrors. This is also close to Fightful's first report that I can find directly about WrestleMania on March 8th. While this is also the report in which they stated, "We spoke to Cody Rhodes and he didn't tell us anything," Fightful did confirm that Cody Rhodes had not signed. A later report by PWInsider did dispute this particular report on the signing, but also that a match was planned between Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. This was of course about 2 weeks after I'd first mentioned that exact match on Twitter. Once again, hit like, subscribe, and be sure to comment below how you feel about the arrival of Cody Rhodes back to the WWE. 10 days after this report by Fightful, we had our first official report about the signing of Cody Rhodes to the WWE. This came from PWInsider and reported that the signature had come 10 to 12 days before the report. This makes it at least at the time of that report from Fightful that I have found, and the only one that I could find at this point in time. I can't say for certain that there wasn't something on Fightful Select because I don't have Fightful Select. I don't pay for wrestling news. This also, going back in the dates, puts the signing right around the time of my Smoke and Mirrors tweet on March 5th about Madison Square Garden. My final report about this was on March 28th, in which I confirmed that Cody Rhodes would not be appearing on WWE Raw, but would be officially debuting at WrestleMania in the match against Seth Rollins. As aforementioned, this is exactly what happened. There is one final report that I have to mention, and that is from the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer. On April 1st, he did report that the match might not be happening after all, and that Cody Rhodes might be going to Ring of Honor to be the head booker. Now, yes, this is factually and provably untrue, but it was also released on April Fool's, so as much as I want to sit here and say this was just a completely wrong report, I do have to give the benefit of the doubt and say that it may have been an April Fool's joke that caught a lot of people out. Cody Rhodes moving from All Elite Wrestling to World Wrestling Entertainment was a surprise. A genuine surprise in a world full of very few surprises left. If you're someone who wants all those details beforehand, you know what to do. You just click subscribe right here. We cover everything going on in wrestling. But there is also a whole host of reports out there, some of which have been right, some of which have been wrong, some of which have just straight been misleading. Despite a wealth of confusing or downright incorrect reporting, there are places and people who knew the facts and shared them. Knowing who to listen to and who to devote your time and energy to is a huge part of knowing what's going on in wrestling. A lot of the big sites just aggregate information without either fact checking it or being able to fact check it because of lack of sources on their part. It's best to come to someone who does follow, who does question, and who does confirm what they're reporting. Cody Rhodes debuted at WrestleMania against Seth Rollins in a match that has been very highly rated, as I initially reported near the end of February on the 24th. If you want to know what's going to happen next, that information may well be right here on this YouTube already. In future, I'm planning to continue this in-depth analysis, reporting about the reporting, highlighting information which has been incorrect and deleted, for example, because that happens as well on some of the big sites and some of the smaller ones. This sort of thing happens far too often, where an incorrect report is ignored because something else came out afterwards, and then something else came out afterwards, and everyone's just moving to the next report, to the next report. The next time an incorrect report comes out from the same source, those same wrestling news sites may well be all over it all over again. Knowing who to trust doesn't just come down to who's popular on that day. It comes down to knowing who was right first and most often. And it comes down to who, when they are wrong, will literally just put their hand up and say, yeah, sorry, I got this one wrong. Because most people in this instance would just pretend it never happened in order to keep people from realizing. For more news and information about the biggest news in wrestling, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because I promise you, wrestling is best enjoyed together. And right here on the Tom Colohue channels, we provide evidence of everything that we report. Nothing is deleted. You can look back through our archive of content right now, and with the dates that I provided, confirm everything that I have just said. In the meantime though, be sure to hit like, subscribe and comment on this video below, because I've been Tom Colohue, you've been fantastic, and I'll see you all very soon.